Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. It is the day after Black Monday, which means that basically every NFL coach that is going to get fired has been fired. So I'm going to cover that in this video, which coaches and general managers have been fired, and who their potential replacements might be. Now obviously, we already know that John Gruden stepped down, and that Urban Meyer's been fired. So those two have been covered. But there's plenty of other coaches that have been fired as well. Now, I'm going to go in order of who is fired. Because why not? Starting out with Vic Fangio, the Broncos coach. Now, he was fired on Sunday because the Broncos played on Saturday. Now, this move makes sense. Because the Broncos GM, John Elway, stepped down last year because he couldn't find a quarterback for the team. So they brought a new GM, George Payton, and he stuck with Vic Fangio. I mean, what are you going to do? It's now middle of the off-season. It's kind of mean to fire him by now. Plus, they hadn't been terrible. I mean, they did go 5-11, should have been way better. But they hadn't been absolutely awful. So, might as well stick with him for one more year, which is what they did. And to give him some credit, the Broncos couldn't find a quarterback whatsoever. Drew Lock actually did okay in this last game against the Chiefs. I've got to admit, they did end up losing, but Drew Lock played well. He could still end up being the future somehow. Teddy Bridgewater played okay, but not, like, starting caliber technically, but not good. What the Broncos want, the rest of their team is at that stage, so what they need is a good quarterback, not just an okay, starting caliber, fine, but not great. They want a great quarterback. That's why they've always been in Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson rumors. Because all three of those players are great quarterbacks, and they could win a Super Bowl with the Broncos, just like what they did with Peyton Manning. So, that's credit on Vic Fangio, but I still think he deserved to get fired. Because they went 7-10 this season, despite having the whole team was improved. The quarterback play was better than last year. The defense was better. They got Von Miller back, and then they proceeded to trade him. But still, he played amazing for the first half of the season. Still, they have Bradley Chubb, Justin Simmons, Patrick Surtain's been great as a rookie. And yet, they're just not producing. Their offense, their run game's been great. Their receivers, meh. But still, it's just not clicking. I think that Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, or Russell Wilson could make that click. But what they need is a proper coach to lead them through it. And Vic Fangio wasn't that. So, he's out the door. Next up, I have both Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, who were fired. Rejoice, Bears fans, rejoice. These two have been terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. So, Ryan Pace has been awful. I'll start with him. He drafted Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. I mean, you should make that move, but that wasn't even his worst move, because I've got to say, you never know what a draft prospect's going to turn out like. Now, it wasn't the best move on him, but he may have looked great in college, better than the other ones. I mean, I know Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, neither were amazing in college. So, Ryan Pace may have just thought, hey, I'm picking the best quarterback here. At the same time, they traded up a ton just to go up from 3 to 2 for him. I mean, that seems a bit excessive. Because, do they need to trade next year's first rounder, amongst other things, just to trade up one spot? I don't think so. Another thing is, just this past year, 2 years ago, they traded for Nick Foles, which I find not the best move. Yes, they wanted competition with Mitch Trubisky, but they're taking on this huge contract. The Jaguars took no salary, and Nick Foles isn't proper competition. So, that was not the best move by them. I don't know why they thought Nick Foles would be good competition for Mitch Trubisky. They're both bad, is the thing. Mitchell Trubisky still could have had a future, but Nick Foles is not a starting quarterback. And then, a year ago, was worse. Especially with their quarterback woes. They signed Andy Dalton to a huge contract. What the heck were they thinking? Andy Dalton was the starter over Nick Foles. And I get it. He had played good in Dallas. But the Bears need a proper starting quarterback. This was just going to create another competition. I mean, I get Nick Foles isn't their starter. So they're going to go out in free agency and find one. They were too far back in the draft, most people thought, to draft a quarterback. So that made sense. But there are so many better options than Andy Dalton. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of people they could have signed. Like, no one amazing. But they could have tried at least a bit harder. Instead, Andy Dalton, or maybe traded up in the draft, instead of signing Andy Dalton. Which then, on draft day, they did end up trading up to get Justin Fields. But see, it would have made more sense not to sign Andy Dalton, trade up in the draft before, trade up higher, because I thought Justin Fields should have gone higher. He was the second best quarterback in the draft, people. And then, they could have gotten their quarterback of the future, whether it be Mac Jones or Justin Fields, or depending on how high they trade up, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. Wouldn't have gotten Trevor Lawrence, let's face it. Anyways, now they trade away this year's first rounder after doing terrible. Justin Fields played fine, but the rest of their team, Khalil Mack's been out injured. Their defense is okay, but one of the biggest things is their coaching, I think. Their coaching has not been good. And Matt Nagy hasn't been given a ton to work with, Ryan Pace, but still. Both should have gone last year. If they hadn't made the playoffs, they would have gone. They barely saved their jobs. So, I'm not surprised at all either of them went out the door. Next up, we have Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, Vikings coach and GM. Now, Mike Zimmer makes sense. They went 10-6, made the playoffs a couple years ago. Then, last year, 7-9, lost a couple players on defense. But then, at last offseason, they worked quite hard to build a better team. And they're going to bring it back to the playoffs. They're never seen as a Super Bowl contender, but they're a playoff contender. But they managed to fail on that, going 8-9 this season. So, Mike Zimmer out the door. That's the whole thing. Now, Rick Spielman, on the other hand, wasn't that bad of a GM. I would have kept him around. Because his drafting ability has been great. I mean, Christian Darrisaw has been good so far, to say so early. But Justin Jefferson the year before has been amazing. Earlier than that, he drafted Stephon Diggs. Now, yeah, trade for Kirk Cousins wasn't the best. But besides that, he's been good, a good GM. So I would have kept him around with a new coach. But apparently that's not what the Vikings ownership thought, so he's out the door. Up now, I have the most surprising one on this list. Brian Flores was fired. Which is weird, because yes, it's his third season. First season, 5-11, but let's face it, they were tanking for Tua. I mean, they trade away every good player they had. They're going into the season with Josh Rosen and Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, I get giving Josh Rosen another chance and all. But still, you could tell they were not really trying. And they managed to get Tua, so good for them. He hasn't been as good as Herbert, who was drafted one pick after him. But still, they managed to get who they wanted to get. Then, last year, they went 10-6. Missed out on the playoffs somehow. What's crazy is that if it had been in the NFC, they would have been the second wildcard team over the Rams, who were also 10-6. But they beat the Rams. So they would have been the second best wildcard team, but instead they managed to miss out on the playoffs. So that's annoying for them. They should have made the playoffs. An 8-8 team makes it in the Bears, but not a 10-6 team. Now this year looked different. They started out this season 1-7. I mean, people are going, holy crap, they lost to the Jaguars. No one loses to the Jaguars. Not even the Texans lose to the Jaguars. It was a close game, but still. No. You know. So, I started off the season thinking, are the Dolphins tanking again? Like, they're clearly going to get a top 5 pick, but they trade their pick to the Eagles because they trade back up after trading down. So, it's like, oh no. But, somehow, they turned their season around. And they finished 8-9. Which, honestly, is remarkable, given their start. So, I'm surprised Brian Flores got fired. Because I found he was a good coach. I mean, maybe a third straight consecutive close but non-playoff year, I would have fired him. But still, 3 years, and he was 24-25. That's not bad. So I am surprised at that one. If I were them, I would have kept him around. But I'm reading, and it sounds like it's more of a, he didn't, like the GM didn't like him, he didn't like the GM, they didn't get along, and also he didn't really get along with Tua. If that's the case, then I guess I can see where they're coming from. But we'll see. Probably more reports will come out about that soon enough. And last, but definitely not least, Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman. Now, technically Dave Gettleman retired, which is another phrase for I'm gonna quit before this team can fire me, and I'm gonna say I retired because I'm old enough to retire, and if I quit, people are gonna think that I quit because they're gonna fire me. So that's what he did. So he basically got pressured out of the organization. He's gonna get fired. And that's a good thing, because he's made so many mistakes. For example, 2018 NFL Draft. He decides, instead of drafting Eli Manning's successor, he decided, hey, I'm gonna go right back at it and try and win again. So that was his genius plan. And yeah, he drafted Saquon Barkley, number 6 overall. It's a running back, and he's been injury prone his whole career. He's been good, above average, but still, he's not 6 overall average. Like, he hasn't been as good as a top 10 pick running back should be. And he's been injured so often that he's barely able to play sometimes. Like, some season he misses most season. He hasn't played much his whole NFL career. So, I do not know what he was thinking, Dave Gettleman, when he drafted Saquon Barkley. I mean, I think they should have drafted quarterback. There's some really great quarterbacks in that draft. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. Can't decide if you're going to call him a great quarterback or an awful quarterback, a bust. But there are also some busts in that draft, as in sort of Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen specifically. So, I don't know why he didn't go and draft a quarterback. Or at least a need they had more. Not a running back as a top 10 pick. He should not do that. And then, in 2019, he drafted Daniel Jones, who is considered to be the 4th best quarterback in the draft. After Dwayne Haskins and Drew Lock. Before both those people. Which, guess what? Daniel Jones has been a draft bust. Now, I mean, so is Dwayne Haskins for sure. And a bit early to speak on Drew Lock, but so far he's been a bust as well. So far, every quarterback except Kyler Murray has been a bust. Oh, and Gardner Minshew. Sad to win a 6th rounder. It's the second best quarterback in the draft. But anyways, so Dave Gettleman has made some huge mistakes over his career. I think it was a good move to pressure him out of the organization, basically fire him. Now, Joe Judge, lots of people are debating on this one. I think it was a smart move, because Joe Judge has been a disaster of a coach. Overall, they've just been bad. Plain bad. So I think what they need is a full restart. It's tough to say with him. It's David Gettleman that's ruined the whole franchise, really. But I think it was a good move to fire him as well. And I think they should also move on from Daniel Jones this offseason. Restart. New quarterback, new coach, new GM, a couple other new pieces, and full-on rebuild. Trade away some older good players, that kind of thing. There are a lot of good head coaching candidates available this season, so I'm just going to go through pretty much all of them. So, starting with Matt Eberflus, he's the Colts defensive coordinator, and the defense for the Colts has been really good. So, I think he deserves a head coaching position. He's built this defense up from scratch. Darius Leonard, DeForest Buckner, now Kwity Paye. So, he deserves to be a head coach in the NFL. If Nick Sirianni can be head coach, then so should Matt Eberflus. Next up, for this 1000th time, I have Eric Bieniemy. I don't know why he doesn't keep getting hired. What is this, the 3rd year straight he's the top contestant to get hired? I wonder if something goes really bad in the interviews. Somehow, none of the teams just like him. Or he's purposely staying with the Chiefs, kind of like a Josh McDaniels situation. Anyways, he should be an NFL head coach. And he could be if he wants to. So, I'm not sure what's going wrong. Something beyond the scenes by now. But if he isn't hired this year, I think it's safe to say that he's not going to be an NFL head coach. For some reason, something's gone wrong in the interviews, or something or other, that no team likes him. Speaking of Josh McDaniels, I also have Josh McDaniels. With the Patriots' rise again, Mac Jones this time, he deserves a head coaching position. So, I'm not sure if he's going to take it. I feel like he's being more groomed to take over from Belichick. Obviously, turned completely away from the head coaching job. The Colts, he was hired, signed the contract and everything, and then backed off last second. So, I'm not sure if he'll actually get hired, but he should be hired. Staying in that division, I have both Brian Daboll and Leslie Frazier for the Bills, offense and defensive coordinators. Brian Daboll, last year he was better of a candidate, with Josh Allen having an almost MVP season. But the offense is still really good. So he deserves a head coaching position. But it would have been better for him to get it last year when Josh Allen was actually playing top 5 quarterback in the league. Now, Leslie Frazier actually really should get a head coaching job. Out of all the people on this list so far, I'm most confident he will become an NFL head coach this season. Because the Bills' defense is good. Like, really good. Last year, they didn't play so well, but this year, they have been good. He has built that unit from scratch, a lot like Matt Eberflus. So, he deserves to be an NFL head coach. He has for a while now, but he's never actually taken the opportunity. But now he should. Now, going over to the Ravens, I'm a bit skeptical that either of these guys will be hired. Greg Roman and Don Martindale, offensive and defensive coordinators respectively, because the Ravens have had a down season, and it's both sides of the ball. But I'm just talking about who should be hired, and both of them should be hired as NFL coaches. Now, Don Martindale, some people might go, hey, like nowadays it's all about young, energetic coaches. He's not exactly that. So yeah, could be an experiment that goes totally wrong for them. But I think he's worth taking a chance on. Greg Roman, just what he's done with Lamar Jackson, he deserves a head coaching position. Just from that. Lamar Jackson alone. Going over to the NFC, I have Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator of the Packers. Do I really need to tell you about this one? I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been amazing the past couple of years. Devontae Adams, amazing. Packers offense is all amazing. He deserves a head coaching job. That's that. Now, the Buccaneers, both of their coordinators could actually go. Both are in interviews now. Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich. Because both sides of the ball have been really good. Now, Todd Bowles did have a stint with the Jets. Didn't end well, but he could still deserve a chance with a team with potential, which is not the Jets, let's face it. Byron Leftwich, the offense has been really good. He deserves a coaching position, and yeah. I mean, not as much as Nathaniel Hackett or Leslie Frazier, but with Tom Brady, he's been good. But at the same time, Tom Brady's former assistant coaches have not been great. And it's possible that it's because Bill Belichick does all the work. But it's also possible that it's because Tom Brady is just amazing. Of course, it doesn't speak for the defensive coordinators, but still, it's tough to say whether Byron Leftwich actually deserves to be hired or not. Now, Cowboys also have 2 coordinators, which is funny because they've never been in the running until now. Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, I'll start with him. What he's done with Dak Prescott and Zeke and everyone else, that offense is great. So he's that young, energetic guy that teams want as well. So I could easily see him getting a head coaching position. Now, Dan Quinn, on the other hand, the defensive coordinator, also deserves a job from his stats this year. But I'm not sure he's going to get one, because I feel like teams might be a bit skeptical. He's had one good season as a defensive coordinator, right back to head coaching. I mean, after a stint at Atlanta, he did lead them to a Super Bowl, but still, I'm not so sure. And lastly on this list, I have Kevin O'Connell and Raheem Morris. Now, Raheem Morris is basically the same case as Dan Quinn. He was the Falcons' interim coach. So I'm not sure if right away teams will want to hire him, but Sean McVay seems to always get his assistant coaches taken from him, because people seem to want them a lot. Zach Taylor, Brandon Staley, even if they're not in high demand. But I think they'll still give Raheem Morris another year, because they like young guys, especially. Raheem Morris is in his 50s, I believe. So, lastly, I have Kevin O'Connell, who I don't think deserves a job, because the offense of the Rams hasn't been amazing, but it's that people want Sean McVay's coaches, and he's younger. So, I could see him getting a head coaching job, but I personally don't think he deserves it yet. Thanks for watching.